How well do you know the media buying space? In this program, we cut through the complexity to offer a vision of a cleaner, more transparent advertising process. One of the issues many firms face when it comes to digital advertising is the number of middlemen, vendors and platforms involved in the media buying process. So with all these fingers in the pie, how do you get visibility into where the real value lies? I caught up with Michael Greene, Director of Research and Marketing Strategy at AudienceScience, to find out.
It's very hard for any advertiser to really understand why it takes over 20 different intermediaries often for them to simply get their ad in front of a customer. And I think what a lot of advertisers have today is a hunch that not everybody in that chain is adding a lot of value. And in most cases, I feel like they're right. In fact, in the same study last year that BCG did that found that 20 different intermediaries sit between that advertiser and the publisher, that was followed up by a study from the ANA and Forrester, which found that something from 50 to 75% of ad value is taken up between that advertiser before their ad even reaches the publisher. So think about 50 to 75% of your ad budget simply going to middlemen, they would have to be adding an extraordinary amount of value for it to be worthwhile. So in many cases, that complexity not adding a lot of value. On top of that, there's also the issue that complexity takes away from transparency. And the issue with lack of transparency is it makes it much more difficult for the advertiser to understand, is that intermediary actually adding value relative to its cost, or is it not? If you don't know how much something costs, it's very hard to say as an advertiser if you're going to get return on investment from it.
Okay, sure. So is this about cutting out that complexity, cutting out some of those middlemen?
I think in many cases, yes. What we're seeing more and more, advertisers looking to simplify their advertising supply chain. From my perspective, technology has always been there, whether it's in your personal life at home or in the enterprise, to make the life of the end user simpler. The problem in digital advertising is we've used technology to make it more complicated without delivering the efficiencies that we really expect technology to deliver.
How do advertisers get greater control and insight, as well as that transparency that they require?
If you think about other parts of the business, from HR to finance and planning to even other parts of marketing, so much of that is being automated today and made more efficient through technology, owned directly by the enterprise. That hasn't happened quite yet at massive scale for advertising, but it's my thesis that it's coming down the pipe. And what we're seeing are leading advertisers around the world doing so. Now, this does pose some unique challenges for an advertiser. Number one thing that an advertiser needs to do is become much more savvy about evaluating technologies and understanding how to piece the multiple technologies that might exist in their overall marketing stack together to create great experiences for their customers. So being able to understand the landscape, understand what's redundant and what truly adds value requires not only a conceptual know-how of marketing, but also a deeper technical understanding that probably not a lot of marketers have had to deal with up to this point in time.
I guess kind of simplicity has to be a key part of any technology solution then, with advertisers taking on more control over that process.
In their search for simplicity, I think what advertisers will often find is that it's the best technologies that are able to most effectively deliver that simplicity and the transparency that you can only get by having a direct relationship with that technology. Because once you get into these long supply chains where you don't have direct contractual relationships with the vast majority of intermediaries sitting between you and showing the ad to the customer, it's impossible to ask for transparency in that scenario.
How are global brands using this type of enterprise ad management system, this new technology? How are they using that effectively?
Every advertiser is trying to become more data savvy and much more targeted in terms of how they use data and how they speak to their audiences today. So having a centralized place where they manage audience data, whether that data is captured online or offline, is incredibly important for an advertiser today. So companies are using technologies like ours to aggregate that data, mine it on the user level, build segments that are reasonable for their organization, and deploy that data in advertising globally. The second component is really what we would call the media execution component. It's one thing to be able to build these segments, manage all this data, but if you can't put it to action, it's not really going to be worth it to you as an advertiser. It's just going to sit there, and pretty expensive and valuable asset just to be sitting there. So a big emphasis increasingly for advertisers is how they can take action on that data. And then the third area is really about how do you build insights across the two. You own this massive data asset, you know a ton about your audiences, you're executing media, making decisions on an impression level in real time. What can you learn from both of those? So one, you can build smarter audiences moving forward, but also so you can plan smarter media moving ahead. So it's about owning those insights, being able to look at the data both across audience and media, so you can create deeper insight and have a better understanding about what you want to do as an advertiser moving forward.
Okay, sure. Is this what we refer to as programmatic buying?
At AudienceScience, we use it all the time, but it seems like every single intermediary or vendor in this industry has a different definition of programmatic and how it creates value for the advertiser. So to me, I think that there are three ways that people are defining programmatic today. The most common thing that an advertiser probably hears when they're thinking about programmatic is what we call bid-based or auction-based media. And you could think about this as simply a different way for negotiating price of media. Instead of going to a salesperson and manually haggling over the price, letting machines run an auction in real time to determine what's the best price for this particular impression. This absolutely has benefits from advertisers, allows them to be pricing inventory more dynamically, pay the right prices for impressions, but it's not quite what I think is the killer component of programmatic buying, which I'll get to in a moment. The second aspect that a lot of people use when they talk about programmatic advertising is workflow automation. This absolutely has major benefits, especially for your agency as an advertiser, in that it lowers the capacity, it lowers the workload that they really have to do, the manual heavy lifting of conducting a media buy on your behalf. So bid-based pricing, workflow automation, all great things, important components of programmatic. But to me, what's most important for the advertiser and the fundamental shift that's happening with programmatic today is programmatic is putting the impression level decisioning control in the hands of the advertiser and not the seller of ad inventory. If you think about what technology has actually been deciding where, when, why, and how your ads get served as an advertiser, it's always been the publisher's technology. And makes a lot of sense, right? It's closest to the consumer. But what that means is that technology is always just making those decisions, not based upon what's best for you, the advertiser, but rather based upon what makes the most money for the publishers themselves. However, with programmatic technology, we now have the technology to say an advertiser can enforce their business rules, what makes most sense for them as the advertiser for every single impression that they serve. And if you could imagine controlling for frequency, targeting, viewability, fraudulent bot traffic, even if it's not the publisher's fault, on every single impression, the efficiency and effectiveness potential is just massive.
Greene insists this is all about empowerment for the advertiser. But with great power comes great responsibility. And in an age of big data, that means more advertisers taking responsibility for data ownership in order to seamlessly execute on the insights at their disposal.
Data is only worth it if you can take action on it. So if you can't take action on it, you're not really controlling and owning that data. But a bigger component, and one that increasingly advertisers are becoming aware of, is making sure that whoever's actually taking action on that data has your permission to take action on that data and is not sharing that data with parties that you don't want it shared with. This is happening across the media buying ecosystem all too often today. You as an advertiser, you're sending your data into an aggregated pool, oftentimes with your competitors' data, and your competitors are taking that data and using it to find a competitive advantage without even you knowing that you have access to that data. That's a problem for a lot of advertisers and can result in really bad business scenarios. So what I say to an advertiser again and again is you need to take ownership of that data, aggregate it in a place where you can use it, but then have strict controls over who can access that data and on what terms. Only then can you make the most of that data asset, and it's going to do the magic it can really do for you as an organization.
And so, Michael, what are you most excited about in this space as we go forward? You know, what's really pushing your buttons over the next 12 to 18 months?
There's going to be an extraordinary amount of maturity in this space over the next 12 to 18 months. What I'm most excited about at AudienceScience in particular is as we onboard more and more advertisers working directly with the system, as we gain more knowledge about what advertisers really need we're going to become so much more intelligent and really be able to push our product development forward. So right now, what's happening on a global basis outside of the US, outside of Western Europe, with advertisers really adopting programmatic technologies is extremely exciting to us. And as a company, we're learning so much more about markets from China to Brazil to Southeast Asia and how to apply this technology effectively. Extremely exciting for us as a company. And I think our clients are going to see an extraordinary growth in our already robust technology based upon these learnings.